Hey everybody. So tonight I'm going to talk about something different. I'm going to talk about Parkinson's and Schmex. Yes, Schmex. Just like in my previous video, I'm going to use a different word than what I'm talking about. And I think everyone should know a little bit about Schmex. So Parkinson's and Schmex is a topic, once again, that nobody talks about and nobody tells us anything about. I've been seen by at least 6 neurologists over the course of my getting to a Parkinson's diagnosis, and nobody ever asked me about Schmex. When I got diagnosed, of course, I started perusing the internet, trying to figure out everything that I could about the disease and like what to expect. And I definitely saw some interesting things about Schmex. In most of the literature that I read, they talk about having a decreased desire for Schmex, especially in women, and erectile dysfunction in men. So, I mean, that was kind of how I thought about it in my mind, that this was going to be kind of more like a decreasing type of situation, not an increasing situation. But that's not the case for everyone. About 3 years before my diagnosis, I noticed personally an increase in my libido. And I am a happily married mother of 2. So it wasn't exactly something that anyone was ready to take me to the hospital for. It was something that was completely manageable. But I thought it was weird at the time. It did concern me a little, and so I remember going to my OBGYN and having labs done and things just to check my hormone levels, and they ended up being totally normal because I'm over 45, and it's not unusual for women my age to have, schmexual issues related to perimenopause and menopause. So I just wanted to make sure that, everything was okay. Anyway, it was one of those things that I just kind of put in my back pocket. I didn't really think about it that much until I did get diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease, and then I received my first medication. And that medication, rasagiline, came with when you go to the pharmacy and you get those package inserts and you read them, like what you are and aren't supposed to do with the medication. Rasagiline is a particularly crazy medication. It's got like tons of things that you're not supposed to do and not supposed to eat and not supposed to drink. So I knew that, and I was reading it really carefully. And I noticed that one of the possible side effects was basically they say impulse control disorders, and they specifically mentioned hyperschmexuality. And I was like, what? That's kind of crazy. So it was in the back of my mind that maybe, that medication might induce that. That wasn't the case. I mean, I haven't felt that with that medication, but as I said, I already kind of had this existing issue. I found out later on then when I got on the second Parkinson's medication, it has that same warning. And so then I did get more concerned because, now I'm taking 2 medications with this. It's like I wouldn't take a Vicodin and a Xanax, you know what I mean? But again, nobody said anything to me about it. Nobody warned me about it. Fortunately, my husband is a pharmacist, so I knew if there was something to worry about, he would say something to me, but it just never came up. And that's kind of my issue with all these things, is like the lack of information, the lack of communication, the lack of being straightforward with us. So after I got on that second medication and I started to, have my symptoms controlled and, know more about what it's like to live with Parkinson's, I did get more interested in these impulse control disorder issues, specifically hyperschmexuality, because the next step for me is that my doctor wants to put me on a dopamine agonist. And the dopamine agonist is notorious for having these impulse control problems, especially hyperschmexuality. And so then I was like, I'm going to be taking 3 of these drugs with this crazy side effect possibility, and nobody's talking to me about it. That seemed really shocking to me. And I made a video about that issue in particular. Anyway, this is my point. When I've mentioned before that I've worked in healthcare all my life, and when you work in healthcare, you talk to doctors and nurses and pharmacists, and you hear stories. And I worked with many nurses that worked in other types of facilities like nursing homes and long-term care facilities and dementia centers and things like that. And one thing that very commonly comes up with those kind of caregivers is these stories about elderly people in these type of settings that do have these issues with hyperschmexuality. Now, I have a disease that predominantly affects people over the age of 60. And many of those people will end up in those types of facilities. So it really makes me think, like, is there something, in the disease process itself that also contributes to that compulsive behavior, those impulse control issues, and hyperschmexuality? Because I had it before I even took any of the medication. And although, not everybody in a nursing home obviously has Parkinson's or whatever, I mean, once again, it's like kind of chicken and the egg kind of thing. Like, I find it coincidental that it's something that's a known issue in that type of elderly population already. And it's something that's a known issue in the medication used to treat Parkinson's anyway. But it's something that I've never been assessed for. Nobody's ever asked me about. I received no instructions on. I received no counseling on any type of like signs and symptoms or things to look for. Or, hey, watch out for this in case you just go off the rails in your schmexuality and blow up your marriage or your life or your family or whatever. And so I want to bring attention to it. I want to bring awareness to it because I know from the last post that I did about the dopamine agonist that this has destroyed a lot of people's lives. And us as patients and caregivers and loved ones, we need to know what to look out for, right? I mean, I always joke about, they always tell us about constipation, right? I mean, if you have Parkinson's, they're always like constipation. And like, I got so many ways to treat constipation, but nobody has ever even mentioned this to me. And I find that really disturbing. And it's part of just a larger package of things that I really want to bring attention and awareness to so that people really can get ahead of these things and live a better quality of life with Parkinson's disease. So anyway, I hope this helps.